All right, so hello, welcome to the newest episode of Rock and Roll Ghost. My guest today is filmmaker Ric Roman Waugh of the new Gerard Butler, Morena Baccarin movie Greenland, which is coming out in September now.
Yep, September 25th here in the U.S.
Okay, but it's being released before then, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but is it out already in some places or no?
Yeah, this is this new day and age that we're living in, with COVID-19 and the days of when we would try to release the world with the same day and date are kind of away from us now. And Tenet will be doing the exact same thing as us. We're already opened in Belgium and coming out in France today, and there'll be several territories that will lead that have theaters open and more people will be able to attend. And hopefully we'll catch ourselves here in the U.S., in September and be able to launch some theatrical movies again, and ours being one of them.
Okay, cool. This is your, I believe, sixth directing job?
Somewhere around there.
Okay. I know you were a stuntman before you took up directing. What made you go make the leap?
I was raised in the business. My brother Scott Waugh was a director as well. Our father was Fred Waugh, who was a stuntman, and we both came up through the stunt business. And he kind of pushed us to find our place in the sandbox. If we didn't want to stay in stunts. And I wasn't built to be an actor. I think that's a special breed to really be able to perform in front of the camera. But I loved what directors were about, and my true mentor was Tony Scott. I worked with Tony a number of years, and he was always so great and generous about helping you understand how to be a filmmaker and being bold with your voice, and and really going to the working school of filmmaking. And that really kind of launched things for me. It was, when I came across as a director from the stunt world, it was, kind of a taboo thing. Like not many people have done it. It was Hal Needham and myself. And then now you're starting to see a lot more stunt people cross over as they're filmmaking, because the truth is that people don't realize that stunt players are usually very close to camera in the coordination of a lot of things and are into a lot of the storytelling aspects. So they kind of make great directors, especially when they can, bring their own brand to it and bring their own kind of narrative sense to it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you've definitely been seeing that a lot more. I mean, it seemed like after John Wick, there's been an explosion of stunt guys getting behind the camera all of a sudden. I think it speaks to the modern way of making films too, which is stunt heavy too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say I'm kind of the antithesis in the group. I'm not the former stuntman that is doing the really big action intensive stuff. I'm much more interested in the narrative driven movies that have something to say and are much more about character pieces. Can I flex my action muscles? Yeah. And it was fun to go kind of back and do Angel Has Fallen and bring those wares back to the table again. I hadn't done them in quite a while. Most stuff I do is much more the dramatic thrillers like Shot Caller and and Snitch with Dwayne Johnson and then now Greenland, and yeah, there's definitely action in Greenland, and we wanted that big visceral feel, and that's kind of what I've been trying to do with movies now. Is I call it hiding the peas in the mashed potatoes. It's giving you a big, hopefully entertaining ride of a movie, but a movie that also has something to say. That's something that feels intimate and relatable to us. Kind of like how the 70s movies were, and that's what I grew up on and loved, like the Sidney Lumet movies, or Dog Day Afternoon, and movies that had this kind of cool commercial sense to them, but you talked about them afterwards. You had a debate about them because they had some type of social relevancy, and that's what really, kind of gets me going and where I try to focus on the stories that I want to tell.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of directors. Sidney Lumet's a really good one. I don't. His career, I haven't even touched on watching all of his films yet, which is a shame.
Amazing. Yeah.
But another one, there's one film I always look to from the 80s called Extreme Prejudice by Walter Hill.
It is one of my guilty pleasures. It is one of my guilty
but
pleasures.
It is if you look back on it, it's really, without being overt, it's saying something about like the whole Iran-Contra thing at the time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot going on in there, and plus it's just a badass modern Western.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, Howard Booth made such a great villain in that movie.
He was amazing.
I never could figure out why Powers Booth didn't have a bigger career than he did, because he was so, in that movie in particular, he was so charismatic.
I agree. You know, it's easy, and I worked with Val Kilmer on Felon, and which I'm really proud of. And you know, everybody talks about him in Tombstone for all intents and purposes.
Oh, great!
Amazing, one of the most amazing performances. But Powers Booth doesn't get his due in that movie because I think he gets overshadowed from what Val did. But Powers Booth, and even in Tombstone, was fantastic. Powers is an amazing actor.
Yeah, he's somebody I was really sad when he passed.
Yeah.
Okay, well let's get into Greenland. Let me just pontificate a bit here on Greenland. I will admit I was not expecting a ton.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I figured, and it was coming off of Gerard Butler just doing a disaster movie that I thought was horrible. So I was like, oh no, another Gerard Butler disaster movie. Can this, be in? And I was shocked. I mean, I was shocked that I absolutely, it was small. It was, in terms of narrative, it was small scale and immediate. Obviously there's some big effect scenes and there's some big, things happening, but the focus is intense and focused on the characters instead of having this overwhelming, it mentions the world, but it always comes back to the immediacy of the family's predicament. And oftentimes that doesn't work either because the family is annoying. The kids annoying. The don't buy them as a couple or as a family. Here, I don't like kids in most movies. The kid in your movie I thought was great and wasn't annoying in the least, which is for me, that's a big praise because that's almost impossible for me to actually like a kid in a movie.
Let's face it, any 7-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, I just generally don't like children. I had one, I liked him, but I don't generally like children. I didn't like children when I was a child. But yeah, it surprised me at how immediate and intense the drama was and how it didn't go into any of the areas I expected it to. So I got to give you praise for making something completely left of center of, I guess, what I was expecting.
Well, thank you. I mean, I get it too. When people had read the script, you read it and you can kind of focus on the effects part of it and wonder if it's going to be this another $100 million movie from the outside in. And I was always dead set on making the movie from the inside out. I think two relatable comps would be A Quiet Place, where you were with this family in a journey and you saw the monsters and you saw the scope, but it was never really about the monsters. It was about this family. Mm-hmm. And I think the other one is Children of Men, that had an unbelievable world building and a great high concept, but you were very much intimate of these characters inside. And what I loved about the original Chris Sparling script of Greenland is it did the same thing. If you think structurally, I love the idea that the first 20 minutes of the story, it's not your usual disaster movie where it's usually the comet is the villain and then you're driving it from there. It's actually this shiny object that everybody's excited about. They're having Super Bowl parties. It's going to be this beautiful flyby. And the drama and the tension is actually within a family that's in crisis, trying to find their legs again to come back together. And we don't know what happened, but we can see that they're barely hanging on by a thin thread. And they think they have all the time in the world to fix it. And then we take time away and suddenly it becomes, which I always thought were two monsters in this movie. One is the eventual extinction event that could come, but really mankind, mankind of, will we turn on each other? Will we become selfless or will we become selfless, and good people doing bad things or bad people doing good things, and those are the kind of moral grays that I love to play with. And this movie's just full of it. And so I love the idea that I have a monster that's going to come and pound everybody, but it's really about seeing how people react. And I mean, I think we should just get the elephant out of the room now. I mean, the interesting thing about this is we filmed this movie a year ago.
Yeah.
We cut it, previewed it, locked picture, and then we found out about COVID. We had no idea about a pandemic coming around the corner. And, you know, when we were making it, we were wondering about, you know, will people believe that society will fall this fast? Will these type of things happen? You know, flash mobs going into stores and, you know, looting, you know, taking everything out of stores, and just will people, desperate people, do heinous things? You know, will good people, you know, come together? So, you know, all these kind of things. And then you suddenly start living through COVID-19, and all of those kind of things became very relevant. And for me, even as the filmmaker, the movie took on a little bit of a different skew for me, because it became much more kind of realistic of a lot of the things that were happening. They're not so far-fetched of how fast, you know, society could collapse or be tested the way that we are now.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of that. The looting of the store and all that really kind of like was even more frightening, because literally, and it's a testament, I guess, to how you made the films. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And I certainly wasn't expecting what ended up happening to separate the family more ended up happening. Without giving away spoilers, you know, I'm not trying to do that, but there's a lot of things that surprised the hell out of me, and I was happy about it, because I was like, sometimes you just watch films and you're like, okay, they're just, you know, it's a product, they're making a product, they're making it either cheap or fast or however. And it's rare to have an entertainment piece of, you know, film be just solid, straightforward, entertaining, and defying expectations. So, especially nowadays with films, you could kind of, I mean, the trailers, you watch a trailer, you see the film.
100%.
You know.
No, and I agree with you. And I think, you know, I'm known for the prison trilogy I did, you know, Felon, Snitch, and Shot Caller. And,
yeah,
you know, a lot of people say, well, yeah, of course, if you get put in prison, it's going to test your morality about survival. And what I loved about Greenland was, I always said, it's you don't need prison to make people find out what they're truly capable of to survive. You just need life or death. And I love the idea that this is out in the outside world, not in a microcosm like prison, that you expect heinous, a heinous, intense situation and pushing people's morality, but it's just life or death will do that regardless.
Well, yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, I think in general, yeah, just I think we've seen a lot this year of what, well, this year, last several years, however, the level of things people will excuse or brush away that in other years we would have called completely immoral behavior, and how people are acting like, oh, it's okay. You know, it's like, well, no, it's not okay. You're trying to make it like it's okay, and you're kind of destroying certain things about us here. But
yeah, you know, I think I you know, the stories that I love to tell, I just believe wholeheartedly that we don't really live in a black and white world. You know, we're
no.
much more in the gray of society, and especially during this pandemic, you know, what we're all capable of for survival, and, you know, and what would we do in these type of situations. And those are the stories that fascinated me. And that's what I loved about Greenland is, yeah, it's this big visceral ride of constantly being pounded, and the, you know, a lot of the, you know, the research that we did about how, you know, comets can break into hundreds of fragments, and, you know, we could use this type of engine where you're not waiting for the big one to come, but at any given moment you can be hit. But really, it's a study about humanity. You know, what would we do to each other, and, you know, we rise up and help each other, or we, you know, and survive longer than cockroaches, or not. You know.
Yeah, I think in the end it's a combination of all of that. I think, you know, people will go in many different directions. And to get back to another example of how much, just how intense, I got to say the first hour in particular is. It's interesting that the first hour to me is even more intense than the last hour, when more, you know, more fragments start hitting. Not that the second hour isn't intense, but the first hour is all I hate to put Jaws on you exactly, but because I recently watched Jaws, it's all before the shark.
Right.
seeing the shark kind of thing. You just know the shark is out there, and it's all how to deal with that. And especially when they're driving away, when they've gotten the family's gotten the call that they've been selected, and the other families in the neighborhood are like, completely flipped out, and how the fact that you took a moment to really let that sink in and be as intense as it was a true defining moment of the film to me.
So the interesting story about that, Brett, is we filmed in this cul-de-sac in Marietta, Georgia. And I wanted that just feel of we all like kind of a version of where everybody lives. Everybody knows each other on their street, and
right.
And kids play together and so forth. And all the neighbors were really just wonderful people, and they embraced us in there, and and we shot in the real house and the whole real neighborhood. And in that first week, about day 4 or 5, we shot the scene where the family leaves and they have to leave the little girl behind, of the whole confrontation. And I mean, it was the first take. It was so gut wrenching to watch. And when we yelled cut, Casey Hoddenfield, my first AD, put his hand on my shoulder and he goes, "Look up the street." And we looked up the street, and all the real neighbors were watching us film, and we're all in tears crying, watching it. And we knew we had something that it was relatable to people of how would we really act in these type of environments, in these situations. The pandemic is testing us all now, how do we keep ourselves not at risk? Do we invite other people over? How do we, I've had friends that have, family members that have passed away from the COVID, and, and it's all of those things that I've loved about this material of Greenland, that I think really shows about humanity and at the end of the day, really, it's a love story, right? It's a love story wrapped around a big, end of the world movie. Yeah,
but not to keep slathering on praise, but I mean, just like everything, there wasn't like for me, there wasn't a false moment. I mean, everything felt right. Even when they get to her father's house, and Scott Glenn. I mean, as somebody that I don't see enough in films. I don't know if he chooses not to work as much or what, but he's always been one of my favorites ever since I think I first saw him in The Right Stuff. Probably, I know he was in some things before that. But I was so happy to see he was part of the cast, and his character was just like everything with the characters was encapsulated so easily and so perfectly by everybody in the movie. It just like everybody seemed to know what they were doing, and it was said without having to say too much, which I thought was great. A lot of these films, they have to over-explain because for some reason it's just not there to explain it without words. And for some reason, like everybody was, you get the script and the direction and the acting. I can't praise the film enough. I'm genuinely just enthusiastic about the film.
No, I appreciate it. I have to give a lot of credit to the team that I was supported by. One of them is being Gerard Butler himself and Morena Baccarin, but also Basil Iwanek and Alan Siegel. Basil is, his company Thunder Road, the Sicario movies and the John Wick movies and Wind River and A Private War. I mean, just really provocative films. And you get into these situations, and in STX, the studio as well, really backed us, Adam Fogelson and Sam Brown. It was, these movies can start to skew really fast into give us more popcorn moments, give us the Statue of Liberty in the sand, and they never did. And we always stayed true as a group of people that wanted to make a movie, because you start talking a mean game in the beginning, and we're going to be character driven and it's going to be intimate. And then you start making, and they're like, give us more of the spectacle. And they never did. We always wanted that balance of being a streamlined movie that had minimal sense of narrative, was really from the character's point of view, and never deviating from that. And I'm really proud that I was supported by a group of people that didn't falter on that mission at the end, because it's so easy to do that at the end.
I can imagine, because the Disaster movie is probably one of my least favorite genres, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Because especially in the last 20 years, it's all these overblown CGI effects, and it's just, it just gets tiring after a while. Even in movies I love the Marvel movies, I love DC, and stuff like that, and I love Star Wars. But sometimes it's like I don't mind CGI. I just don't need it hitting me every moment.
Yeah.
And it's like, it was just such a refreshing thing. It's a real shame, actually, that like we're not open for theaters right now. You could just put it out now, because I think it would be a huge hit right now.
It is. It's nerve wracking. I would love to get people to see this movie now, but hopefully we'll be seeing it soon here. And
yeah,
the other thing I hope happens is that the things that we're dealing with as a world right now will help us to understand that we need stories that kind of push the envelope and aren't so watered down. I mean, in the superhero world, in the Marvel world, I mean, Logan's a perfect example of a movie that really had something to say, and it still gave you all the bells and whistles that you came to. But it was a real story, and I hope we get more of those. I hope we get more people like, I don't want to get too kind of out there on this, but I think, when you think about the 70s, those movies, you're coming out of the late 60s and you're coming through the Vietnam War. I mean, we went through hell as a country, as we are right now. And what I loved is that the 70s reflected on where characters weren't impervious to pain. They had real flaws. They were dealing with issues. We were still entertained, like the Sidney Lumet movies we're talking about, and other great, directors of those times, and the stars that weren't afraid to show their characters be, with warts and all. And I'm really proud of, of Gerard Butler and Morena, because they both, which I loved about this movie, was it's never about a man just winning back his woman. It's really a husband and wife trying to win back their love and win back their marriage together. And that they both, which I love, when, not to give away the movie, but they both go through massive detritus and get exposed into their own primal sense. And that was something that I learned through, the prison movies I've made and the documentary, That Which I Love Destroys Me, about war and PTSD is, we have all this artifice that we put on ourselves to think that what makes us our stature and, and gives us our signature as a person. And we don't realize at the end of the day, we're still just these primal beings, that when all of that's taken away and that fight or flight mechanism comes in, and clicks in, will we cower or will we fight? And I loved that this movie tested that, not just for Jerry's character, but Morena's character as well. The horrific things that she has to go through as a woman and as a parent, and how she has to fight through that. I loved that part of the movie.
And something else that just kind of struck me that I don't think I really thought about until now. I feel like both Gerard and Morena were on equal footing in this film.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Which is good. It wasn't just, the pretty wife is in danger and I save, the big man comes and saves her. She goes out and does what she needs to do to protect her, her family as well in every step, honestly.
It's music to my ears, because that's what our intention was, never to have her just be the wife to Jerry Butler. We wanted this to be a two-hander of these two people, trying to win their love back and then survive together and go through both sides of their stories, and how difficult all of our families are. I don't know about your family, but our family and every family has issues and things that they deal with and struggles. And we wanted the movie to be relatable to people, not to give you that cardboard cutout family in the beginning where everything's picture perfect and ooh, here comes the big bad monster in the sky. We wanted real issues and real things to deal with.
Well, in so many of these movies, and I guess we're also in a time now where it feels like it's necessary to, not even necessary. It's demanded that female representation, starts equaling male representation in films too. And so often in a lot of these types of movies, the perfect family, as you said, the wife and the kid are just there because the character has to have a wife and a kid to save. But they really, don't add anything to it. They're just an object, for the plot.
Right.
And so that's what was so great about and refreshing about your film. Let me talk a little bit about working with Gerard Butler. This is your second time working with him after Angels Fallen, and you're working with him on something called Kandahar at some point.
That's next.
Yeah, but you don't have any idea of starting that right now, do you?
Well, we'll be in production before the end of the year.
Oh, you're definitely
we're already starting to prep. Yeah, we're already in prep.
Okay.
It's Jerry and I met 10 years ago. I was up to direct Law Abiding Citizen and ended up not getting the job, but we really hit it off with one another and kind of knew that there was something that, we wanted, there was some kind of chemistry that we had that we definitely wanted to work together. And, years later, he called me, after staying in touch and brought up coming into the His Fallen franchise, but really trying to reinvent it and do it in a new kind of interesting way. And you hope that everything you bet on of having chemistry is going to pay off. And I'll tell you, on day one, if it's there or not. It's just like a marriage. And it was there, just like, in spades. We had this great kind of chemistry of pushing each other, not pulling any punches, and trying to push each other. And, very proud of what we did on Angel Has Fallen. And then it was like, okay, what can we do to not have you be the action Mike Banning guy? How can we make you more of the William Holden, or make you the moral guy that doesn't have any special skills? And that's where the script Greenland came around, and we just fell in love with it. And it was, I think, by far one of Jerry's best performances, and it super honest. I mean, a guy that's known to be this big action star, there's none of that in the movie at all,
Right.
And now what's interesting is this other piece of material came through called Kandahar, and what I love about it is it's a modern day Lawrence of Arabia. It's a look at the Middle East, where, again, a region of the world that has been kind of presented as a cardboard cutout, right? Everybody with an AK-47 is a bad guy. And
Right.
What I love about the material is Jerry's character goes into a world that he considers home now, because he's been there for so many years as a CIA agent, working in the Middle East. But all the people that we meet, the Pakistanis, the Iranians, the Afghans, all the different sectors, you meet their families, and they're all these three-dimensional characters, and it's about the people stuck in this never-ending cycle of conflict. And that's
Right.
what I love about it, is it really as much as I feel Greenland can help redefine the disaster genre, Kandahar really kind of redefines the Middle East movie for me, of all the war stuff that we've seen.
Well, I'm really eager to see that now, based on your description, because I think one point that you made just then is something that I've thought of before, is that we as Americans tend to forget that the people are not the government.
Exactly.
Just like, I mean, in a lot of ways, we are not our government. We're
exactly.
Those people are trapped by powers that are far more powerful than they are, and there's a reason why they're more powerful, because they take they've taken power from people. So these regular people that just want to live their life are just kind of viewed as other. And it's in our, I guess it's in our DNA, where we, going back to the Native Americans, pushing them out and making them other, even though this was their land, and, immigrants, and, the whole thing goes on and on and on. We have a nation of just hating the other, and I'm very intrigued by Kandahar now that you're speaking about it.
It's very on point of what you're talking about, Brett. It's, I know a lot of the special operations world, doing the documentary, and a lot of them talk about, they're not policymakers, they're the ones that have to go deal with it. There's a great saying from a Delta Force operator that, I'm not good at peace. That's for the policymakers. And when they fail, what I'm good at is war. And, but that goes for all the factions. And, what I love about what Kandahar does is it doesn't talk about the policymakers. It shows the people on the ground that have to deal with the policy and enforce it, where in the complexity of a region where one day somebody's your ally and the very next day they're your adversary, you know,
Yeah.
and then right back the other way again. And it's been like this for years. And I just went back, I know the last time you've seen Lawrence of Arabia, but it's so provocative. Even today, you look at it and it's just so relevant of the region of what it's still dealing with, and things that are, which I love about Kandahar is it doesn't just reflect in the historical things of tradition, but really the modernization and westernization of a lot of regions in the Middle East, and that clash that is happening that we see a lot of times in different places, and it speaks to that, which I love.
Yeah, I mean, as I've gotten older, I tend to review history a little bit more, and it's always been fascinating to me. A lot of the problems we have now, or have had in the last 20 or so years with the Middle East, are because of us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Our
intervention in, especially after World War II, in Middle Eastern governments, propping up dictators and the like, just so we could get, oil or whatever, we needed at the time, has really come back to bite us in the ass, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people just ignore that fact because they don't think that there's anything to learn from it, but there's always something to learn from history.
Yeah, and it is a never-ending cycle. We were talking about doing a project about the rise and the fall of dictators, and how many have been built by the United States, strongmen, that become these dictators, and we have to go and take them out. And I think this historically, when you look back at the fact that, we armed the Mujahideen, that where bin Laden came out of, and then we're back in there getting them, and the stuff between, the Iraq, man. Yeah, it's such a complex world over there that's going to be fun to play with it, but it doesn't deal with the politics. It deals with the people that are afflicted by the politics and are affected by the politics. Well,
that's good too, because I think putting a real human spin on things too also helps. I mean, if somebody comes in viewing something as an entertainment and comes out learning something or feeling differently, then that's great. It's so hard to change people's minds these days, it seems.
And that's all I want, Brett. My goal as a filmmaker is to just give you the 50-yard line of something that's a pretty dicey subject matter, whether it's prison reform or the mandatory minimum sentencing laws, war addiction, Greenland, a very divisive world we live in right now. And I'm not trying to steer you left or steer you right. What I just want to do is entertain the heck out of you, hopefully. And when you come out of the theater, have the debates you're talking about. Have discussions, and out of discussion, out of debate, we get change. Things happen,
Yeah. So getting back to how I started, to get more in depth into what I was trying to say. So this Kandahar will be your third movie with Gerard Butler. What is it about you two that really clicks to do this many films in a row?
It's chemistry. It's the trust with each other. And I think when you see some of the greatest collaborations, they're usually not a one-off movie. They're usually a body of work, and we used to live in an era where people work together continuously, and there'll be movies that he'll make without me, and there'll be movies I'll make without him. But I think we both found somebody that we can be confident in the type of storytelling that we like, be fearless about it. And I got a guy that's in the front of the camera that's a big movie star, but he's also fearless about not having to stay in this little box that people want to put him in. I love the idea, and I don't take any disrespect of your initial kind of thoughts about Greenland of, Gerard Butler and disaster movie, and then completely standing on its head and giving you something different, because I think he's capable of that. Well, he's proven it, because he's a tremendous actor that's not a one-note kind of a person. And so when I've got somebody fearless in front of the camera that is hoping that I'll do the same thing and be fearless behind the camera, then we can live or die by the sword together, and hopefully make great things that, kind of define something in a unique way.
Yeah. Another point that I loved about the film is that it wasn't jokey. There wasn't any of that side jokiness. It was a serious film. I mean, I just think about some of these films, and it's like, there's somebody always winking to the audience and stuff. It's like, come on. I mean, I know nobody sets out to make a bad film. I'm not one of those guys that thinks that people are just, shit filmmakers, and, they will always make shit films. And I know I have enough friends that are filmmakers to know how much negative criticism affects them. At the same time, I grew up in an era where things were dissected and critiqued, and I see, both sides, of the equation. I think there's plenty of room to, bag on a truly awful film, but in a way that doesn't attack the actual people for being, whatever. And the modern way of doing things is just to completely debase the artist for some reason, which I don't agree with.
I think a lot of it has to do with tone. I'm super strict about tone, and I think we find ourselves trying to be too cute sometimes, or getting out of the pocket of what the movie is. And I mean, one of the funniest moments in the movie, at least for me, and I know the audiences get a kick out of it, just happened off the cuff. And it's where, Gerard Butler and Holt McCallany kind of meet about this plane getting off the ground, and this, this whole thing about how much does he weigh. And, but it wasn't really even a scripted moment. It was just two guys having this thing about playing it real, like a pilot thinking about all the weight that he's going to put on this aircraft, and can he get off the ground, and a man doing everything he can to lie his way through getting his family on this plane. And so I think that once you find levity, and especially for my movies, if I'm trying to do something that's very grounded and authentic, levity can be authentic and grounded as well, but it's got to come from a character point of view. It can't be the bolt-on slapstick line that you get away with in some of the other type of movies,
Yeah, it's weird that you brought that up, because it wasn't something I found. I find it funny now that you brought it up, but I remember when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, that was cool, because it was like, like, come on, man, you're how much do you weigh?
And those are, and I think that's, again, I'm so proud of the performances in the movie, that everybody stayed true to what their MO was and their character journey, but found those little moments, in between them,
Yeah. And you brought up a whole McCallany. That's a guy that he's really paid his dues over the years. He's been in a lot of stuff. I mean, I forgot that he was in Alien 3 back in the early 90s, and he's somebody that since Mindhunter on Netflix came out,
wow,
I've really kind of changed my opinion. I mean, not that I didn't think anything up, but I just, he was a guy that was, a deep character part. He wasn't a supporting actor. I mean, a supporting, actor in a sense, but not like fourth, fifth build or whatever. He was usually lower on the totem pole. And ever since Mindhunter, I was like, man, this guy's got a lot, and he doesn't have a large part, I mean, he has a crucial part in the film, but he's still, it was still quite good to see him. Even Hope Davis in her role too was like, wow. It's like I like, for a second I wasn't even sure it was Hope Davis, because I didn't think she was in the film, and I looked on IMDb, and both her and Holt aren't listed for some reason. And I noticed they were in the credits. I was like, well, maybe there's, a lot of people sometimes will just be uncredited for no particular reason. But no, it was just IMDb screwing up. So
what else is new?
Yeah.
But like, there's a second movie I've made with Holt, and I agree with you about Mindhunters, but I also agree about Holt. I think that he's one of those actors that's truly gifted, and he's done some amazing things, from Fight Club and a lot of the other Fincher movies, and playing the Beast in Shot Caller. He's a tremendous actor, and we definitely want to work more together. But I think he's one of those guys that finally started getting his due, and and I think that's the kind of the key to this business is you just keep your head down and grind, and just keep pushing forward. And if you work hard enough, the right things will happen. And Holt McCallany is a perfect example of that.
Well, I mean, look at, somebody like Gene Hackman didn't start working until he was like in his 40s. I mean, there's a lot of people like that. I mean,
Morgan Freeman, we talked about a lot,
right.
Morgan and all, how long it took him to really break.
Oh God, Morgan Freeman was hilarious. When Street Smart came out, I was like, wait a minute, why do I know that dude? And it wasn't until years later I realized he was on the show I watched as a kid, Electric Company.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, Morgan Freeman was on Electric Company. I used to watch it all the time as a kid. It's just so bizarre. But like, you know, there's a lot of people that get those late starts in their career and they end up being just absolutely brilliant, you know, for a while. I mean, you know, Anthony Hopkins didn't really take off until late in his career too. I mean, he, you know,
and it's amazing to talk to those to the veterans. You know, I've worked with God rest his soul, Sam Shepard, and just hearing about his journey and working with Nick Nolte and Morgan Freeman, and then now Scott Glenn. You know, Susan Sarandon I worked with on Snitch, and it's just so much fun to hear their stories and what they bring to the table. And also when they come to set, there's just this sense of this aura around them of, you know, professionalism. And I mean, especially with Morgan and Nick, you know, on Angel, and then now Scott Glenn, you know, I mean, if we could all have biceps like that at 80 years old, we'll be in good shape.
Yeah, Scott Glenn still looks like he could kick my ass, but I think most people could kick my ass, so I'm not.
Oh, he
surprised.
and I were smoking and joking with his wife Carol, you know, just on set and talking about, you know, he knew I grew up in the stunt business, and a lot of his old friends were stunt players, you know, stuntmen, and we were talking about martial arts, and he threw a kidney punch on me in my ribs, and Carol's like, "Oh, Scott, you stop it right now!" And I was like, This son of a bitch can still hit, man.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't want to fuck with Scott Glenn. Even if he was on his deathbed, I wouldn't want to fuck with Scott Glenn. You mentioned Tony Scott. Which films did you work with him on?
Started with Beverly Hills Cop 2, and then True Romance, and Days of Thunder, and on and on and on.
Okay, so you worked with him a lot.
The last thing that I did with Tony, which was basically the last movie I worked in stunts, was True Romance.
Okay. Well, that's definitely, that was a cool movie. I'm actually talking to Tom Sizemore tonight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I've interviewed him before, and, you know, I know Tom's had his problems, but I've always been one of his big supporters, so I'm eager to see how he's doing tonight. But yeah, True Romance, that was one of those films that really blew my mind, and Tony came to Chicago and showed the director's cut at the Art Institute of Chicago, you know, not long after it came and already went. Because that one was a surprise. Like, I expected that to be huge. You know, it was coming off of Terrence being a big deal, you know, being a hot name, and Tony had definitely delivered a ton of big films, and for that film to not have gotten, it's obviously, in retrospect, been huge. It's a cult classic, basically.
Yeah.
But he brought that there, and I had the chance to talk to him, and that was one of the best moments of my life, because for some reason, you know, it's like, he was just such a cool guy. I don't know how to, you know,
salt of the earth.
Yeah, I didn't get to know him very well. I know some other people. A friend of mine, Joe Carnahan, worked with him a lot, and you know, he just made really cool films. And it's odd too that we're mentioning Scott Glenn. I mean, he remade the movie Man on Fire that Scott Glenn originally starred in.
No, I mean, Tony, Tony was a very selfless individual. How much he was in Joe's corner and was always there for me. And what I think he showed a lot of us young bucks was be fearless and don't mimic other people. Don't imitate. Be just live or die by your own brand and your own voice. And if you fall on your face, you fall on your face, but have that courage. And if you look at Tony's movies, you look at Ridley, his brother, you know what that signature is. You know what a Tony Scott movie is, and they're fearless. I mean, Man on Fire, to deal with all the different type of camera techniques and not make it gimmicky, not to make it like, what the hell am I watching here, but really something provocative and a different narrative that we've ever seen. And then look at all the movies that start stealing that shit. You know what I mean? Like, everybody was doing the wind-up cameras and everything else at that point. But, you know, I love that. I love filmmakers. And we have some really talented people working today that I'm big fans of, you know, that you just see them being fearless and doing their thing, you know, and telling telling with their voice, not trying to be other, you know, mimic others.
Excellent. All right. Well, I've got one more question for you, and then I'm going to let you go, if that's okay.
Please.
Okay. Do you have a top 5 films?
Yeah. And they, by the way, today I'll tell you what my top 5 are, but they might change tomorrow, right?
Absolutely.
Apocalypse Now, I think, is one of the most extraordinary movies of an absolute train wreck of a shoot that
Yeah.
came together and magic. And I love that because I've been there. Those things that were, you know, the destruction of things like that.
Yeah, I just bought that the whole big set with the final cut, the whatever the last cut was, the original film. It's on 4K U8. I mean,
Yeah.
right now, I don't want them to release another damn version of this because I've owned every copy of Apocalypse Now.
I agree.
Every form except for I never bought the Laserdisc.
And I'll go one more Coppola. I think The Godfather 2 is an extraordinary movie of two brilliant storylines that were so cohesive and a father and son parallel that really did something to, you know, to tell you that narrative story. You go and because I'm going to go do Kandahar, I've been looking back at some movies again and to watch Ben-Hur and watch the remastered version of Lawrence of Arabia, you know, Citizen Kane, The Searchers. You know, Jerry and I Butler are big fans of that movie and would love to find a modern day type of version of The Searchers. You know, you start looking back at those movies, and I think all the ones I'm talking about, they were really avant-garde. They had pretty controversial subject matters that they danced around, but did it in an entertaining way.
Yeah. For me, it's Apocalypse and the second Godfather ranks just a little bit below the first. The first one is one that I think is probably the most perfect film ever made, as far as
by far.
It just does everything, you know. But I rank Apocalypse Now. I finally just decided. I used to go between Apocalypse Now, The Godfather, and Star Wars as my favorite film. Star Wars because it launched my real interest in film. The Godfather because I think it's perfect. But I finally just named Apocalypse Now the best film ever because of the freaking audacity of everything in it. It's not a perfect film by far. None of the versions are perfect. It's honestly a mess in a lot, but it's audacious and it tries to say a lot. You could tell everything in it is worked for and it's sweated for, and no matter what, I mean, that was a film. I don't think we'll ever see a film on that level ever again.
No, another one comes to mind, and again, because it had something to say, was Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner.
Yeah, that's up there for me too.
The Rutger Hauer, which I have now found out, was really an improv about man versus machine and how much a machine would love to be a real mortal man, and just the whole thing about life and history. Just brilliant filmmaking that you get out there. And again, the way they made Blade Runner back then, they weren't dealing with these big effects, back like that, the visual effects and so forth, and a lot of it had to be in camera and tricks and so forth. Just brilliant filmmaking.
Yeah, that's that and Apocalypse Now. I've owned every version of Blade Runner there is possible at one point, and I finally have all of them in one place. And I've like when it came out, I watched every work print, the whole the whole damn thing straight through. Like especially when the sequel came out, which I was shocked at the sequel being as good as it was. Because I had been building up so much over the years in my head. It's always good when you get to see those films in the theater too.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm a fan of Denis Villeneuve. I'm really anxious to see Dune. I wonder to see what his version of Dune is going to be.
I am hoping that can still come out this Christmas.
Yeah.
I really am going to be bummed out if I can't see Dune this year.
And I gotta throw another name out there because he's been a true mentor of mine, Jerry Bruckheimer. I will be the first person to see the new Top Gun. I cannot wait to see.
That's going to be cool. Yeah, I'm interested.
I want to see my sons are 13 now, and we just showed them the original Top Gun the other night, and they had these big smiles on their face, and I'm like, now we're gonna go see Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, and it's weird to think that movie was considered the pinnacle of of product entertainment for its time.
Right.
And you look back on it, it's like, I guess we just keep moving the bar so much differently that it seems somehow quaint comparatively.
Yeah.
Well, I'm dying to see what they do. And Tom Cruise is just absolutely insane. He will do. I mean, this next movie, he said he's going into space, which I'm like, I don't think Tom Cruise is going to be happy until he dies on camera.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's completely insane.
Yeah, he's putting a lot of stunt people out of business.
Yeah, it is a little weird that he keeps doing his stunts. Well, Rick, I really appreciate you taking the time. It was a great conversation, at least on my end.
Brett, as well. Thank you, man. It was a really, really good chat with you.
And I really, really hope the best for Greenland and going forward. And hopefully we'll be able to talk again.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be on the horn again with Kandahar. I think you really like it. I mean, we haven't made it yet, but the material, I'm super thrilled with it. So my job is just not to fuck it up.
Yeah,
the material's there.
Who's the studio or the entity? Is STX?
No studio. We're doing it fully independent, and Gerard Butler will be back in, as you know, and Basil Iwanek is producing, and we're excited. We're going to be shooting all over the Middle East and doing it our way, and that was a testament to Basil Iwanek. He got the movie financed without any studio at this point, to where we have no creative oversight. We can really make a movie that's not watered down. Do it our way.
Awesome. All right. Well, good luck with that. Stay safe, and
you too, bud.
Good luck with Greenland.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. You take care.
All right, Brett.
All right. Bye.